I would like a very quick, in 1 minute, no more please. What are the key factors that you contribute to this race? And while you're at it, what are the 2 things that you want to accomplish that are actually achievable? Start with you, Tony.
Well, the 2 things that I want to accomplish should I get elected to the U.S. Congress is 1, begin to pare down the amount that we're spending on defense. Right now we're spending roughly $600 billion on defense as part of our budget. When you look at what the Soviets are spending, they're spending roughly $400 million, and the Chinese are...
Let me just, don't go into all the explanation.
Okay,
just
and the second...
What are the 2 issues you want to accomplish? I don't want the whole,
Gotcha.
I just want to hear the issues.
And I believe the question was that you can actually accomplish.
Yeah, there's an emphasis.
Well,
so let's move along with that one.
I'm excited for this one.
And the second thing that I want to accomplish is begin to chip away at the payment on interest that the federal government is spending. It's right now doing $200 million, and it's projected to go up to $900 million in 10 years. Might be billion, by the way. So it's like cities and their respective unfunded liabilities. So this is an obligation that we're leaving to future generations. So those are the 2 policy things.
And what are the 2 key things? What are the distinct things you bring to the table?
The distinct things I bring to the table are energy and a passion for policy. And in my way of things, I want to be the Democratic equivalent of Paul Ryan in dealing with the budget matters.
Well, the 2 things that I want to do is do what I've done in the legislature, which can contribute to the budget. I'd like to be in the budget committee. I played a significant role as chair of 2 of the major subcommittees in the Senate, Public Safety and Health and Human Services. And working well with my Republican colleagues, we were able to work with the governor and balance a budget that was seen as impossible to do. So I would like to do the same thing in the Congress. And the second issue is transportation and infrastructure. As you know, I've been able to, in the 25 years I've been elected office and chairs of both transportation committees, be able to do significant contributions to the district. And the things that I think I can contribute is my resume and my experience, and I know the district very well. I've been very available in the district, and I've been elected office in the district for 25 years.
And what do you bring to the table?
What I just said.
What you just said. Anything more you want to?
Raised a family here, lived here for 35 years, owned a business for 30 years.
Yeah, I don't need the bio. I just, okay.
Don't you want to hear about my bio? You've written about it.
So let me get this straight. You're to you that budget's balanced that you have.
It's according to the LAO it is, but to be honest, we have huge unmet needs. So I've never been shy about saying we've got a $300 billion shortfall for transportation. We've got CalSTRS is a huge problem, as is CalPERS, but CalSTRS in particular. So as we go through the rainy day issues, those things are going to have to be addressed. So when I say budget, it's balanced, but that is a significant accomplishment. But that doesn't diminish the fact that the state has huge challenges. I'd be happy to come back and talk to you about state issues at least.
Hi.
Okay, thank you. The things that I would like to see accomplished, I'd like to see us get Social Security solvent, because if we don't make changes, it's going to be broke by 2020, and it is fixable, and there are clear ways to fix it. Millionaires and billionaires need to pay their fair share. We need to raise
2020.
2020, yeah, and we need to raise the ceiling so that wealthy people pay their fair share. The second thing, I'd like to make sure that Medicare is not touched. I mean, Medicare works, it works well, it provides excellent benefits to our seniors, like my mother who lives here in Walnut Creek. and I want to make sure that it's not touched, and in fact would like to see a single payer system for U.S. healthcare. What I bring to the table is that I am someone who's very good at working with contentious parties who are not getting along very well, and getting them to work together and get the job done. And I'm a fighter for the things that I believe in, and will work very hard, tirelessly, and will be a tireless advocate for the hardworking families of Contra Costa County in that regard.
Yeah, I want to bring my ability to walk across the aisle to improve the political infrastructure in the Congress. There's been so much acrimony, there's been so much animosity that has been causing a lot of gridlock in the Congress, and not only within the Congress, but also lack of respect and civility between different branches of the government. I want to put an end to that. Secondly, I want to improve the economy by creating job creations with a combination between improvement of the immigration policy as well as education program, by sustaining an education program that focus more on energy, on science, and most recently on what we refer to as fracking, which is hydraulic fractioning and horizontal drilling, to move the country into a new industrial area.
I'm sorry, you're for or against?
I'm in favor. I'm in favor of that.
And what do you bring to the table?
I bring to the table my perspective of diversity, and then my ability to walk across the aisle.
Jason?
Hi, good morning, afternoon.
Whatever, I don't know what time it is.
We work all kinds of hours, so it's always morning for me.
Morning and night.
So I'm a short and sweet kind of guy. So the two things that I would do if elected to Congress would be fix our education system first and foremost. It is a failing system. It has failed us. It's ridiculous. I have two kids, 9 and 5, and that's what I'm looking forward to. The second thing that I would fix is our federal budget. We have so much bloating going on that we're just spending money left and right over ridiculous items. There's too many to go into to be long-winded here. Two things I bring to the table is my youth. I can spend the next 30, 40 years making relationships, developing relationships, working across both parties. And the second thing is my enthusiasm. I'm here to make a difference. Short and sweet answers, short and sweet bills.
Sure.
So,
Go ahead, yeah, so what were you gonna say?
so if you're gonna fix the education system, that implies, or I infer from that you're talking about a greater role for the federal government.
Yes, as far as spending goes into it. We spend money so much other places. We can dump more monies into our schools. If I can go on a little bit more, our schools across first world countries are just appalling. California is one of the worst systems in the United States for our science or mathematics. We are just not spending enough money. Just for comparison, we spend $60,000 a year on inmates. California, we spend $13,000 to $14,000 per student per year. There's a huge discrepancy here. Our money's going to the wrong places.
Sure.
Two things that I would like to work on is gender equity in pay, education, and access to health care. The second one is social justice reform. Those are two things that can be fixed relatively. Those are things that are realistically fixable.
And what do you bring to the table?
I bring to the table, I am that gap person and a diversity person because of who I am as an individual. I am a person of mixed culture, mixed heritage, and I stand right in the middle. I'm neither liberal nor ultra conservative. I am multilingual, multi-diverse, And I, as a professional, I live and work in mediating and negotiating deals. It's what I've done for 20 years on the federal level, on the state level. I bring that experience with me. And the ability to see into the future and not just in front of my face and be able to take my ego and put it to the side. This isn't another notch on my belt. That type of ability is what I bring.
Dan, quick question.
Pardon? Oh, this is Dan Hatfield, I'm sorry.
Dan Hatfield, I'm the.
Yeah, the two Dans, you know, you got one on either side.
Bookends.
Yeah.
That makes it easy to remember. Just scream Dan, they all look.
Very dynamic team.
Okay, so we'll start, we'll mix it up a little bit. Kai, give me your impression of the Affordable Care Act, if you would, please.
My impression of the Affordable Care Act is that it was a very important step in the right direction. I mean, this country had a system of health care that left quite a bit to be desired, not the least of which was the fact that people would not be able to get insurance due to pre-existing conditions. This frankly is something that affects both me and my wife personally. We both had significant surgeries and we're perfectly healthy today, but we understand how important it is. I mean, so I think that the ACA is a very, very important piece of legislation.
How well is it working?
I think that it's working fairly well. I mean, there have been a number of additional people who've been insured. I mean, there were certainly problems with the registrations. It seems like those are being resolved, and there are certainly other issues with it that are being resolved. I think the new Secretary of Health and Human Services, Sylvia Matthews, is a personal friend of mine, college classmate, and just a top-notch person. She's going to get on these issues, and I think that it's going to be working quite nicely as we go forward.
Mark?
I think it's a good thing. Healthcare in this country was unsustainable. 18% of the GDP was spent on healthcare. The dollar amount is equivalent to a third of the Chinese, the second largest economy in the United States, and our health outcomes were inferior. We're like 24th in terms of health outcomes. I played a significant role in the Senate. I was chair of the Budget Subcommittee when we were doing ACA. In California, we've done it well. I've also been on both health committees and was involved in all of this, all the way through the Assembly and the Senate. I've got a bill on Monday that I'm presenting with Commissioner David Jones to help small businesses actually extend their current health care. The thing about the ACA is it's one of the largest pieces of domestic policy change in the United States. It's very complex. So we in California, I think the governor and Secretary Dooley has done a very good job, and I've worked closely with them. I've been one of the key people to make sure that as we implement it in California, we do it right. There are huge challenges ahead, but I think in California it's working well. If I had my way, we'd do Medicare for all like the rest of the industrialized world does, but that's not possible. This may actually work out better, but we'll see. It's got challenges.
Like an airplane taking off, there were certainly some bumpy rides, but we're not yet at the smooth gliding portion of the flight yet. I think while the intention of the program is laudable, and the program, as a Democrat, I would certainly support it, what its ultimate outcomes are with regard to containing costs are still unclear. Although that was one of the two things that certainly factored into it. So it remains to be seen, what's going to happen. But as a Democrat, we need to be supportive of it. We need to tinker it, and particularly take a look at what senators like Landrieu are looking at to create what's called a copper plan. So those people who lost their insurance plans because their lower paying plans didn't meet the standards required by ACA, that those persons are somehow accommodated through modifying ACA.
Sure.
It was important. It's a landmark legislation that's important for those people who are experiencing extreme poverty and trauma. The only issue that I have with the plan, outside of the typical technical difficulties, is the pressure that it's putting on small business to ensure that it doesn't cause undue financial burden. You know, what we've experienced over the last few months with our workers, especially our workers with significant disabilities, is that a lot of them are not understanding their particular responsibilities in getting the insurance, and they're having problems signing up for insurance or understanding how they're impacted as far as their medical benefits with the state. So those type of issues are issues that just need to be cleared up. So, you know, that small print and those type of administrative issues weren't well thought out. But those are things that can be cleared up.
But you're generally supportive.
Oh, I'm very supportive, and I think it's things that like that'll make it easier for those who are, you know, our most vulnerable people in society.
Jason?
I think that in concept and on paper, it's a fantastic idea. I think that going towards people who are uninsurable, lower income families, it's worked fairly well for. I think for upper middle class, it's done an injustice too. People like myself who have good benefits with my job, it's going to cost me more to maintain the same doctor at the same hospital I go to. So it's impacting the middle class. People I work with, people I work around, people in my community, it's going to hurt them a lot more than the people who are uninsurable. I am not for it in the way it's currently written. I think it needs to be severely reworked to include everybody and not have different tiers and different scales based on how much you make. But I think if it's going to be a universal health.
I'm not following that.
Go ahead.
Explain what you're trying to say there. I'm not sure I'm following that.
As
It
far
needs to be reworked to do what?
It's because it's declared as universal healthcare.
Yeah.
So regardless of how much you make, or if you have pre-existing conditions or not, or depending what hospital you go to, it should be the same care, the same cost for everybody. And I don't mean if you make minimum wage and it's going to cost you, just round numbers, $100 a month, and somebody else makes $250,000, $300,000 a year, it shouldn't cost them the same thing, but it should be at a flat percentage. Costs you 1%, costs somebody makes more of the same percentage. You should be allowed to keep your same doctor at the same rates. For me personally, to keep my same doctor, it's going to cost me a whole lot more per month. So as it stands, I'm not in favor of it.
Judge?
Yeah, this is the United States of America, and the Affordable Care Health Program is a very complex issue, but a landmark piece of legislation that prior to its passage in 2010 has been debated for months and years, and then has been passed, and since then has been also declared constitutional, the legislation itself. The question is how is its implementation for a piece of legislation which is so important. It takes time to test the implementation, to see whether it's affordable to everybody and at what cost. The approach has to be a pragmatic approach, stay away from ideological and political along the party line, to focus on the healthcare and the future of the healthcare for the common good of the nation and not of any side based on ideology. As it passed, it's the law of the land, and I will follow closely its implementation because it's very serious impact, not only on the current status, but on the future generations, including those who are not born yet.
But you're circling around my question.
I'm not circling around. Go ahead.
Do you support it or not?
Oh, I'm support as it is, but I wait until to see the implementation. It is important to see the implementation and enforcement, how it affects in reality. I support the concept, affordable, but I want to know that it is affordable.
Okay. Let's start with you, Cheryl. The other way. Under what circumstances, if any, Should the U.S. or NATO militarily engage in Ukraine?
I can't really hear you.
Under what circumstances, if any, should the U.S. or NATO engage in Ukraine?
If the Ukraine is bothering the U.S.
Pardon?
If the Ukraine is bothering the U.S.
Tony?
I favor several levels of approach. One, I think we need to hit the Soviets where I think they're most vulnerable, and it's on economics. So one of the things we might want to do is look at allowing the exports of oil, which right now are you can't export it, so that we can shore up Germany as they become our ally, strengthen our relationship in dealing with the Ukraine situation. So deal with it on the economic front first, but in a parallel track, also begin to look at supporting the Ukraine in terms of providing them better equipment than what we've been giving them right now. Because the bigger picture is not just the Ukraine, but it's also the possibility of the Baltic states, and because there are also similar situations there where there are Russian nationals and Russian-speaking people there. You know, is Putin trying to bring back the old Soviet model of bullying the neighboring?
So is there a point at which you would favor some sort of military engagement? And what would that measure?
Well, the next level, in addition, is I would also begin to take a look at arming NATO differently. I don't think we're at a point now of sending in either troops or even military advisors to Ukraine, and because I think there are economic and other military assistance that we could provide short of sending troops or even military advisors.
Mark?
The question was, under what
Under
circumstances?
what circumstances, if any, should the U.S. or NATO militarily engage in Ukraine?
I can't imagine one unless there was just a human atrocity. I think we have to be very limited in our use of military force. I didn't support the war in Iraq, and I think the cost of our military adventurism is both to our national reputation and to our domestic policy. So in the Ukraine, I'd be very, very cautious, and I think we have a lot of other influence. Sanctions have become more effective over time in Iran. They're not perfect, but they're certainly more cost effective to the U.S. budget. Not to mention to young Americans, putting them at risk.
Prior to the U.S. Engaging in military conflict, I think that we need to have either direct action against the U.S. or its interests, or clear and credible intelligence that that there is going to be such direct action. So, with respect to the Ukraine, I do not currently see a scenario which would make sense for us to get militarily engaged in the Ukraine. And I think that funds which might go towards something like that would be better redeployed domestically. And I do think that whenever we do get engaged in a military conflict, we need to do so with an exit strategy. And I don't, if we were to get involved there, I'd have to be quite certain of what that was.
Ukraine, and before that, the occupation and invasion of Georgia in 2008 are the most typical examples that, in my opinion, the Cold War was declared ended too soon in 1992. Because at that time, we still have half of the population in the planet. China, Cuba, Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia was still under communism. When we ask the question, under what circumstances should we engage militarily, my opinion is that we should never take military action as an active role or as a supporting role or as a supplier off the table, because by maintaining our military superpower, we actually save lives and blood. 25 years after the Wall of Berlin. We still have, and the dismemberment of the Soviet Union in 1991. The geopolitics now is back. Look at Russia, annexation of Crimea without even shooting one bullet. Look at what happened in China with the threat to control the coastal lines, and the reaction in Japan. We have to be ready, but most important, in order to engage globalization, we have to look back home and prepare our country. So the country needs to be more involved globally with the understanding that globalization only makes the country stronger, not weaker.
Jason?
I think when there is a direct threat to human life and liberty, we would get involved. As far as NATO, if we're on the risk of genocide or people cannot defend themselves against a greater power, I think they should get involved. It's quite simple.
Let's start with you, Jason. We'll work the other way. Give me your evaluation of Senator Feinstein's drought relief bill as recently amended.
Give you a short version of it.
Give us your evaluation of it.
I haven't read our most recent drought bill, so I can give you a good answer on that.
Judge?
Yeah, can you repeat your question, please?
Give us your evaluation of Senator Feinstein's drought relief bill as recently amended.
Well, I have to admit that I haven't read it.
So the drought question in Northern California is a serious one. I think that Representative Miller's recent steps to try to expand the Los Vaqueros reservoir make quite a bit of sense. I mean, drought is a big issue, not just for Northern California, but for the rest of our country, because a lot of our country's food comes from Northern California.
My question was
Okay.
giving an evaluation of Senator Feinstein's bill.
Yeah, so I've not read Senator Feinstein's bill, but if it is addressing the drought issues in California, then I think, there are obviously very serious issues that are national issues.
Senator?
I think it's a good first step. I've always felt that Senator, although I have a huge amount of respect, was a little bit too influenced by agricultural interests, particularly the Westlands District and Kern. My general view of what we have to do is with water is more in line with Congressman Miller. That it used to be seen as a north-south, and I realize the questions about the drought, but this is an extreme opportunity for us to actually deal with the drought, but deal
Let me
with
back you up. Was too influenced by ag? You're talking about the bill?
the bill and her policy in general,
Okay,
in my
and
opinion.
Can you be specific?
Well, to the degree that I can be specific, I haven't read the whole bill, but to the degree that it helps ag and the unemployment in the valley and helps support infrastructure for ag to get through the drought, it's appropriate. It's just, we have to come to a decision on long-term infrastructure and short-term for the drought, and that's the opportunity to make a decision on the governor's proposal and where the federal government and federal contracts come in. So I think it's a good first step. I think we need drought relief. I think the president is supportive of it, and that's all good things. But as it influences the proper and efficient use of a very valuable resource, I think the agricultural industry in the state of California has to become more efficient.
Attorney?
I haven't read the bill. I will read the bill, and I will make sure to email you my summary of the bill.
Sure.
Well, I did read the bill, and I only read it because it came to my email.
Okay, and what's your take on it?
My
What's your evaluation of it?
my evaluation is, my biggest criticism is, similar to Mark, but except that I think it didn't go far enough in the conservation efforts for the general population in stipulating the penalties for overuse of water by individuals and by businesses. I believe that, the Delta Conservation proposals by the governor in conjunction with what Senator Feinstein is proposing would go a long way to everyone understanding how severe our drought is. Our agriculture, I'm a conservationist and I'm also a vegetarian. So our agriculture is very important to us. Now what she's proposing to help the agriculture, to help our farmers get through this drought is very important. If anybody wants to have some vegetables and those who are meat eaters want to have some food, we're going to have to help our farmers get through this drought period. So I actually don't think it goes far enough to help our farmers.
Who have I not started with?
You started with me, you started with Jason. I don't think
You've
you
not
started with
started
Judge.
with
Oh, well, you're the lucky
You
one.
started with Judge.
Okay. Kai, what action, if anything, should Congress take on net neutrality?
Okay, well, I think that Congress should not take action on net neutrality. I think that we should basically leave the current system in place. I think that
Should leave us, all right?
there shouldn't be any changes made. That we should leave the current system in place, and that there shouldn't be we should let the market continue as it's been going in that area. I mean, and I'm not in favor of any additional taxes on traffic.
Judge?
Yeah, I couldn't hear your question. You are soft spoken.
What action, if any, should Congress take on net neutrality?
On net neutrality?
Net neutrality.
What is net neutrality? I don't understand the question.
Not fair.
I don't understand the question.
Jason?
We're talking internet neutrality?
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
I think the federal government kind of needs to leave the area alone. They need to stay neutral and just keep a hands-off policy. It really opposes against our First Amendment rights to look at countries like China that lock down the internet and censor it. It really limits a person's right to the First Amendment. So in short.
Sure.
I think you're going to start limiting those with limited resources. The access to the internet, especially in areas where we have the most vulnerable people and where when education is concerned, education is very important, and when you have children who need that access or people with limited income who need that access, and you start charging them for access to the internet, forget about the people who can pay for it. You're getting into dangerous waters. The government needs to take a hands-off approach.
Tony?
Sometimes an elected official has to make a stand, even if it goes against the grain. Having said that, I believe that we need to take a look at the proposals to have a tiered internet situation in which people with a faster rate pay a higher price. And the reason why, as a moderate Democrat, I think this is important is, from the big picture of things, the United States' internet rate is somewhere like the 10th in the world, not only after South Korea, but I believe also after Lithuania. So the speed of our internet is slow compared to so many other countries, and the only way to modernize it is by having the private sector invest in it, which therefore requires some level of a tiered system. Now, what I would do as a congressman is to make sure that there are safeguards so that persons for whom pricing it will be difficult, that there would be options available.
I would associate myself with the comments of Senator Warren. I think she's been terrific, particularly the past week. And I think it's had a direct effect on the chairman of the Federal Communications position on net neutrality. I think it's incredibly important, as I sit in this building, for information, that net neutrality is as as neutral as possible. The average American, the average citizen in the world needs to be able to access information through the internet, and I believe the private sector will continue to improve its capacity. But ultimately, every citizen is going to get their information, and your parent company, I think, now has the word digital in it. That's how we're going to access information. So the importance of the accessibility and transparency for every American to get information on the internet is a very important thing.
So you referenced something, let me see if I understand what you're saying. What action should you referenced the FCC, you referenced Congress, what action should Congress take?
I think if the FCC goes too far to limit or to encourage a two-tiered system or a multiple-tiered system, they should provide legislation that would stop it. And I think action is also not just legislation, particularly if you're a member of the minority party, or in this case with Senator Warren, where you're limited as to what you can do legislatively. You have a bully pulpit, and I think her actions were perfect because I believe in reading what's happened in the last few weeks, she's affected the position of the Federal Communications Commission and the administration.
I didn't understand that by net. You mean internet, so I want to follow up with a short answer.
Sure.
I would leave that alone because taxing the internet, we're not China. The people have to free to use the internet. Taxing the internet to me is equivalent, almost like taxing the air we breathe. That's all I want to say.
Okay, and so we haven't started with you, Judge. Do I?
That's right.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
And we went this way, so we'll go that way, right?
Yes.
Okay. Judge, so do you support federal funding for California's high-speed rail?
Okay. California, can you repeat the
Do
question?
you support federal funding for California's high-speed rail?
I do support because I don't see the reason why, if the high-speed rail in California, I think that the federal government can support that, and I would welcome that because I don't see any reasons for not welcoming the support of such a program.
Hi.
So I think we've got a lot of infrastructure issues in California in general. I mean, I think that in many ways what federal dollars we get, we need to put toward our currently crumbling bridges and highways and so forth. I mean, if we can get the money to fix up our current infrastructure deficiencies, which by the way will create jobs.
Do you support federal funding for
Okay, well,
California's high-speed rail?
That's my next sentence. So if we can get our current issues in infrastructure fixed and get the money for high-speed rail, I think that's great. But I think if our federal funds are limited, let's make safe and fix what we've got and create jobs.
Mark?
No, not as currently construed. As you know, I was one of 4 Democrats who voted against authorizing our bond monies to match the federal funds. As chair of the Senate Transportation Committee, I've been very involved in this. I'm currently meet with the plaintiffs in the state lawsuit. I've tried to engage the governor and the administration to see if we can fix what is very seriously broken. It's a huge boondoggle in my view. It's going to suck the air out of the state budget. I've been in multiple meetings with Secretary LaHood leading up to this, and Secretary LaHood, the ranking person, the Secretary of Transportation during most of the Obama administration, told me that they were going to come up with 1/3 of the money for the overall program, which is now $68 billion, but we've been told by experts it will probably be 2 to 3 times that. The federal government doesn't have the funding for it. Representative Denham, a former colleague of mine in the Senate, a Republican, has moved to take the money back. We're in danger of having to pay money back on an isolated facility that will never give real function to the state of California. So very engaged in it. I believe in a world-class passenger rail system over the next 30 to 50 years in California, but we're doing it the exact opposite of every other industrialized country. Japan has the best model. I've met with them. I've seen it. I can go on longer.
Yes, I support federal funding of a high-speed rail through the Central Valley connecting the major urban centers of California. I think it's imperative that not just California, but that throughout the country, we lay down high-speed tracks, much in the way that Japan has already done for many years, South Korea and China. I think this is absolutely vital for our economic growth. I think there's a lot of untapped potential in the Central Valley that would be fully realized by having the high-speed rail. It's gonna cost a lot of money. Granted, I understand that, but it's an investment worth making.
Sure.
This is like the bridge to nowhere, the train to nowhere. Everybody supported it, now they don't support it. So, I'll just tell you, I never supported it, and I'm not gonna support it now. We need that money for a lot of other things, like educating our children. There you go. Let's just make this easy for you. Type no a couple of times. Make it easy for you.
Jason?
I'd like to just repeat what Cheryl said. No, I think it's a financial sinkhole. I think we need to cut our losses what we can. The federal government should not support it, and the state of California should get out of it. Should I go on?
No,
Okay.
no, that's good.
Excellent.
Okay. Let's start back with you, Tony.
Yes.
What role should Congress play in education policy?
Congress has played an exceptional role with the passage of No Child Left Behind in 2002, George Miller's. When you look at, for example, the rate at which students who graduate are also have successfully undertaken the UC, CSU, A through F courses, the percentage of the kids, especially, for example, in West Contra Costa, went from 33% of the graduates to 39% of the graduates. In terms of the discrete number of kids, that was, I think, roughly 700 more kids. So No Child Left Behind, federal legislation, certainly had positive impacts in West Contra Costa County with regard to that indicator. I think there's a role for the federal government to provide standards that are flexible enough to meet, to allow for local considerations. But ultimately, the decisions should be local, because schools, and for the most part, the what funds that are generated for schools are local funds, and what federal dollars that come down, I think appropriately should be for categorical projects and populations, leaving the general type of funding and also the responsibility to the local.
Mark?
I think it plays an important role, but it's ultimately up to the local districts in the states. Congressman Miller is chair of the Education and Labor Committee and is a ranking member for that since 1994. Either ranking member or chair has played an important role in this. I think we need accountability. I don't think No Child Left Behind has worked, but I think there are parts of it. I didn't believe in charter schools, but Congressman Miller convinced me that done right, they provide an opportunity for accountability.
Back up, you don't think that No Child Left Behind
Has worked terribly well, but I do believe in accountability, teacher accountability. So on the charter schools, Congressman Miller convinced me in the case of Clayton Valley Charter School, which is in my neighborhood, would work, and it has worked because you've got buy-in from the parents, the teachers, and so far in a very short period of time, I've seen that school do much better. So I think there's a balance this country is struggling with. As somebody who's been supported by the CTA in the past, I think their role should be more directed, and I've had this conversation with Joe Nunez, the head of it, multiple times, that polling shows that the public loves their teachers, but they don't like the union. I think it's unfortunate that the reformers and CTA are working together for the best interest of the students, because I think there's such a thing as ineffective accountability, but we've got to get to the right point where teachers and administrators are held accountable and we have the best results for kids. And right now in this state, the fight between the reform movement and the CTA is destructive to the kids.
Right.
Wait a minute, did you just say ineffective accountability?
I may have
3 times. I think accountability is like anything. You can reach diminishing returns on that as well. And as somebody who's spent a lot of time both in the private sector and the public sector is and the higher you get up in larger organizations, so the feds are the worst at it, it becomes a bureaucratic process that isn't very effective, is what I was trying to say, in the actual administration of the services.
Well, this is a critical issue. I'm the son of 2 public school teachers. I mean, I think that a good public education from cradle to college is critical. I think there is a role for Congress to play, and I'm going to talk about that. But the problem,
Please do.
yeah. So yeah, and the problem is that Congress has been bickering, right? They've not. No Child Left Behind is broken. It needs to be fixed. They've waited since. They haven't gotten together on funding for that since 2009. It's a real issue, I think that there is a role for Congress to play. As states do the different experiments, Congress needs to be an aggregator and a disseminator of that. Of the best practices. And I think that there's absolutely an active role for Congress to play. I also think that we're living in a global labor force now, frankly, and we need to hold our students to standards that will make them competitive on a global level. So I think that there's a role for the Corps and for accountability across schools on a global level.
Yes. If there is one area where the government or the federal has to have a role, that is education. And let me explain why. I know that education of our children are the responsibility local of the school boards of the state, but each state has a different policy. The nation has a high stake in preparing the future of the nation, and that is in the field of education. If the federal government is mandated to protect the security, to create jobs, then the federal also has the responsibility in providing guidance in the field of education so that we can compete in the future as we walk into the 21st century. The answer is yes.
Yes, they do. I think they should have a key supporting role in our education system, being that whether you live in California or Texas or Ohio or New York, regardless of what state you live in, you deserve to have the same education. It'd be a free education and a well-rounded education. The problem that we have with our local schools and the state government controlling it is if you live in a rich neighborhood, say Blackhawk or Alamo, Danville, you go to very good schools. If you live in some of the poor neighborhoods, such as in Pittsburgh, you go to a not-so-good school. If we fix our education system, we're going to fix our population, we're going to fix our crime, it's going to fix so many of the issues we have in America. Short and sweet is yes, it needs to take a very huge supporting role in regulating it.
Sure.
The federal government not only should, but they have a supreme responsibility to be not only involved, but to be the creators of our educational system. I grew up in Missouri, where it's a AAA education. California is an A education. So what we study in Missouri is so far and beyond what is called the college prep education in California. And what I learned in 7th grade, they're not learning until high school in California. And that's not fair to the children in California. In California, I gawked in amazement at some of the statistics that Tony just quoted and some of the things that Mark just said, because the children in Richmond are not getting the same education as the children in these neighborhoods that Jason just named.
Okay,
so the problem we have here is that when you have a certain zip code or a certain bank account, you're going to get a different education. If the federal government does not set the standards at the federal level on what these teachers must teach, what our students must learn, and develop that from a federal level on what those standards are, for the educational system, for the entire country at every level, from kindergarten until 12th grade, we will have an educational system that will continue to fail, that will continue to call for our employers to continue to import labor, especially for our college students and our college graduates, because we have college graduates who can barely read. We have high school graduates who are not graduating at the same educational level across the board and across the country. Now, you cut off other people on other questions, and I've answered you very succinctly on every other question, but this one I'm very passionate about.
I can tell.
All right? So, education-wise, we need a federal government that is more effective than putting acronyms and ideology. And we have people who keep throwing ideology at the table instead of looking at what these children need and saying, we are going to set standards across the board, across the country, no matter where you live, no matter what your bank account looks like. I was fortunate enough to have people who can afford to send me education, and that's what we need, plain and simple.
Just quickly, I didn't say no federal standards. I said federal standards, but that also are flexible enough to take into account local.
No, it wasn't that. It was the percentages you quoted, and I'm telling you in West Contra Costa that wasn't true.
Okay. So, final question, starting with you, Jason. What role, if any, should the federal government have at this point on guns?
On guns?
Guns.
Your favorite subject. Jason's favorite.
We didn't start with you by accident.
Yeah, right? I've been kind of renegade in this one.
Yes,
It would be, I think they should. Again, it goes
They
with
should what?
They should
Have guns.
step in, it should, and they should help regulate it.
How? Be specific. What, I want specifics. What should the federal government do?
They should regulate the laws across all the states to be the same. That way everybody has their Second Amendment protected, everybody has the right to bear arms, to keep them. I do have some limitations on if you're carrying a bazooka or a tank, but small arms, rifles, and shotguns if we can. I think everybody has their liberal right. And it shouldn't be regulated by the state because every state already has a different stance on that. We've seen that and it's failed so far. The government will step in and say, these are the rights, we will protect your rights. It's simple.
Judge.
It's the Second Amendment rights. The question is how much and whether it should be regulated. The answer is yes, but let me give you some specific example. We have FDA, Federal Drug Authority. We have EPA, Environment Protection Agency. So to protect the environment, to protect the safety of our food. The right to bear arms, correctly, is in the Second Amendment. But it is to bear arms, a weapon that can harm people. So therefore, it is only imperative, it is only the minimum requirement to have a security check on those guns owner. Not only that, there must be some sort of monitoring.
Okay, so my question is really specific. What, if any, action should Congress take?
The Congress should take action to mandate a security check on guns ownership and use of guns. That's my specific answer.
Congress needs to make sure, first of all, that that someone who buys a gun in any circumstance, at gun shows on the internet, has a background check. That background check is a comprehensive check for any history of mental illness. Okay, and I also believe that there needs to be a ban on assault weapons. I do not. I view them as weapons of mass destruction that can kill dozens or hundreds in a matter of minutes. And I think Congress should ban further sale of those weapons. As far as the Second Amendment right of someone to have a pistol in their home, so that if someone comes in at night, they can protect their family. I'm okay with that. But yeah, I've answered.
Mark?
I think the federal government should play a significant role in gun control. The courts have said over the years that the Second Amendment isn't free absolute right to carry. There are limitations, and they've opined that local government and state governments have the ability to go to put reasonable gun control laws in. I think the Feinstein assault weapon ban should be reinstated and close the loopholes in it. I think there should be, at the federal level, universal background checks, so people who have mental health problems or members of families, as in the case in Connecticut, don't have access to weapons. I have a bill that Senator Markey has replicated at the federal level. I've done it 3 times now. The German Republic actually copied it and put it into law that would require that once smart guns are established so that there's a personal identifier on it. And they have prototypes right now.
So keeping this federal, you would support what?
Well, just on this bill, I would support Markey's bill, which is the same as the bills I have in the state senate.
So specifically, at the federal level, would do what?
It would require any gun sold in the United States once the technology has been developed and they're on the verge of it. There's a lot of venture capital. Mr. Cohen in San Francisco is putting a lot of VC money in this to establish that there's either a biometric identifier, so only somebody authorized to use the gun can use it, or there'd be, just like a cell phone, a PIN number to let the gun be used. The technology exists right now, up to 13 people, so you could allow family members to use it. And you could also, if you wanted to be used for self-defense at night, you can disarm the gun with a personal identifier for a period of time. If we got that bill, it would deal away with lost and stolen guns that result in almost 50% of the, over 50% of the guns used in crimes are lost and stolen. So technology, I think, is going to play a huge part in changing the discussion in this country. And there's a bill in the U.S. Senate by Senator Markey from Massachusetts that would do that. It mimics the bill that I've carried 3 times in the state legislature.
The U.S. Congress owes it to the kids from Connecticut to fashion, promote, and adopt the strongest federal gun regulation legislation possible. A particular angle that I would take in this regard is improving the way the background check. We shouldn't have a system where you spend more time getting a license for a car than you do
improve the background check.
and for a more extensive background check that would be funded by some kind of tax, sales tax on bullets or something like that. Much more extensive than what background checks, if any, there are right now.
Thank you, and Cheryl?
The Congress, and let me just say this, they don't owe it just to the kids of Connecticut, they owe it to all these children on the street who get killed every day. They owe it to everybody. Background checks, Congress owes a universal, every state, take it away from the states, just one policy for every state. Protect the Second Amendment rights to bear arms, but also responsibility falls upon the gun owner, so that if they have a gun, especially in the home, it needs to be locked away so no child or irresponsible person, especially somebody who lives in a home who has mental illness, can get a hold of that gun. And background checks, it just needs to be universal across the board, and it needs to come from the federal level, not the state level.
Dan, if I can add real quick while you're typing, you don't have to put in your notes. But there was a study done in 2013 from Harvard showing that looser gun controls lead to lower crime. It's a proven statistic across all European countries.
Okay. Folks, thank you very much.